The ancient pine trees of the Night Fang territory stood like silent, disapproving giants, their branches weaving a canopy that choked out much of the afternoon sun. Below, in the perpetual twilight of the forest floor, a small, slight figure moved with a weary grace. This was Selene, and the basket she carried was piled high with damp, earthy-smelling roots she had been ordered to dig up. Her muscles ached with a familiar, dull pain, a constant companion in her life as the pack Omega. Being the Omega meant you were last. It meant your voice was the quietest, your portion was the smallest, and your home was the farthest from the heart of the pack. For Selene, home was a tiny one-room cabin nestled right against the jagged stone boundary of their lands, a place so remote that the sounds of the pack, the laughter, the howls, the communal feasts, never reached her ears. The cabin was old, its wood weathered to a soft silver gray, and the roof sometimes leaked when the rains were heavy, but Selene did her best to make it warm. Pots of resilient herbs and cheerful wildflowers sat on the windowsill, and inside, everything was scrubbed clean. A small rebellion against the dirt and disregard the world showed her. As she placed another heavy root into her basket, a shadow fell over her. She didn't need to look up to know it was Beta Grunt, a wolf whose size was matched only by his cruelty. "Is that all?" his voice grumbled, a sound like rocks grinding together. "The Alpha's mate expects a full basket for her healing tonics. She says you're not trying. Maybe a night without supper will motivate those lazy Omega hands of yours." Selene kept her eyes on the ground, a habit born from long practice. "Yes, Beta Grunt. I'll find more." Arguing was pointless. It only ever made things worse. He snorted, a puff of hot, unpleasant air, and stomped away, his large feet crushing a patch of her carefully tended moss garden. Selene waited until the sound of his footsteps faded completely before she let her shoulders slump. She looked at her basket. It was already full. He just enjoyed reminding her of her place. The walk back to her cabin was long and lonely. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The birds had stopped singing and the air grew thick and heavy. A deep, unnatural grumble echoed in the distance. A storm was coming, and not just any storm. This was the kind of savage weather that swept down from the northern mountains, full of fury and wild energy. Selene quickened her pace, worry for her little garden and her fragile roof pushing her tired legs faster. By the time she reached her cabin, the first fat, cold raindrops were beginning to fall, splattering on the dry ground like warnings. She hurried inside, barring the wooden door against the rising wind that had begun to moan through the trees. She lit a single oil lamp, its warm glow pushing back against the gathering gloom outside. The sound of the storm quickly grew from a moan to a roar. Rain lashed against her windows, and the wind screamed like a living thing, shaking the very walls of her small sanctuary. She huddled by her small fireplace, adding another log, praying the roof would hold. It was in the middle of the storm's most furious hour that she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the crack of a branch or the howl of the wind. It was a low, pained whine, followed by a thud that was too solid, too heavy to be debris. It came from the west, from the oldest part of the woods where the trees grew dangerously close to the cliffs. Her first thought was to stay put. No sane person went out in this. But the sound came again, weaker this time, a desperate animal cry of pure agony that cut through the storm's noise and went straight to her heart. She couldn't ignore it. Wrapping a thin shawl around her shoulders, she unbarred the door and pushed against the wind, forcing her way out into the nightmare weather. The rain instantly soaked her to the skin, and the wind tried to steal the very breath from her lungs. She stumbled forward, following the memory of the sound, her feet slipping on the wet ground. "Hello," she called out, her voice a tiny thing against the storm's power. "Where are you?" A flash of lightning lit up the forest for a split second, and in that blinding white light she saw him. A massive wolf, larger than any she had ever seen, with fur as dark as midnight, was pinned under the weight of a great fallen pine tree. The sight was so shocking she froze. He was magnificent even in his terrible state. But he was utterly trapped and the storm was drowning him. As another roll of thunder crashed overhead, his head fell back to the mud, his golden eyes glazing over with pain and exhaustion. He was giving up. "No!" Selene cried, scrambling forward. She fell to her knees in the mud beside him. The tree was enormous, its trunk thicker than her body. She was just one girl, an Omega. There was no way she could move this. But as she looked into the wolf's fading eyes, she knew she had to try. She wedged her hands under the rough bark, finding a place where a broken branch provided a small grip. She braced her feet and pulled with every ounce of strength she possessed. It was like trying to lift a mountain. The wood scraped her palms raw and a sharp pain shot through her back. She screamed into the wind, a wordless cry of effort and determination, pulling until black spots danced in her vision. Just as her strength was about to fail completely, the log shifted with a deep groan. It was only an inch, but it was enough. The wolf, sensing the change, let out a mighty snarl, and with a final burst of his own immense strength, he dragged his body free from the crushing weight. Selene collapsed into the mud, gasping for air, her arms trembling uncontrollably. The great wolf lay panting beside her, his leg bent at a sickening angle. He was free, but he couldn't walk. Somehow she had to get him to shelter. "Come on," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You have to help me. Please." She didn't know if he could understand her, but he seemed to. He struggled to his 3 good legs, leaning his immense weight against her small frame. The journey back to the cabin was a slow, agonizing nightmare. They slipped and fell. The wind and rain blinded them. Several times Selene's legs buckled, but she always got back up, gritting her teeth against the strain. It felt like hours before the warm glow of her cabin window appeared through the sheets of rain. She half dragged, half guided the wounded giant through her door and onto the woven rug before her fireplace. He immediately collapsed, a pool of rainwater and blood spreading around him. Selene barred the door again, shutting out the storm, and turned to face the creature she had saved. In the steady light of her lamp, she could see the true extent of his injuries. His beautiful dark fur was matted with blood and dirt, and his breathing was shallow. He watched her, his intelligent golden eyes following her every move, but he made no aggressive sound. There was only a deep, weary trust in his gaze. Working quickly, Selene gathered her supplies: a bowl of clean water, strips of soft cloth torn from an old dress, and a jar of healing salve she made from her garden herbs. She knelt beside him, speaking in a soft, soothing murmur. "It's all right now. You're safe. This might sting a little." Gently she began to clean his wounds, washing away the mud and blood. He flinched once but held still, allowing her to tend to him. She smoothed the herbal salve onto his cuts and with great difficulty, used the cloth strips to bind his broken leg, fashioning a splint from 2 sturdy pieces of firewood. When she was finished, she dragged her own thin blanket over his shivering body. Exhaustion hit her like its own kind of storm. She curled up on the floor next to him, too tired even to climb into her own bed, and listened to his breathing slowly deepen and even out as sleep claimed him. The last thing she saw before her own eyes closed was the flickering firelight reflecting in the watchful golden eyes of the mysterious wolf she had rescued from the darkness. The first thing Selene became aware of was a profound, unfamiliar warmth. It seeped into her bones, chasing away the deep chill that had settled in during the storm. The second was a heavy weight across her side, pinning her gently but firmly to the floor. The third was the sound of steady, deep breathing that was not her own. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the soft, gray light of dawn filtering through her single window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and dripping peacefully. Her gaze traveled downward. The massive wolf was gone. In its place, lying beside her on the floor, was a man. The weight across her was his arm, draped protectively over her. Her head was pillowed not on her own ragged blanket, but on the hard, warm plane of his chest, rising and falling with each of those deep, sleeping breaths. A scream caught in her throat, stifled by pure, undiluted shock. She carefully, slowly extricated herself from his hold, scrambling backward until her shoulders pressed against the cool stone of the fireplace hearth. He was breathtaking. That was the only word for it. Even in sleep, his face was strong and handsome, with a sharp jawline shadowed by a dark stubble and thick, dark lashes resting against his cheeks. His hair was as black as the wolf's fur had been, tousled and falling across his forehead. His body was all lean, powerful muscle from his broad shoulders down to his. Selene's cheeks flushed a hot, furious red and she quickly averted her eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of trousers that had been torn and muddy during the storm. The bandages she had so carefully applied were wrapped around his muscular torso and his leg, the neat white cloth a stark contrast to his tanned skin. She must have made a sound, a gasp or a shuffle, because his eyes snapped open. They were the same piercing gold as the wolf's, and in that first instant of waking, they held a wild, ancient power that made Selene want to shrink into the wall. But the look vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a flicker of confusion and then a dawning awareness as he saw her pressed fearfully against the hearth. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, wincing only slightly at the pain in his leg. "Easy." His voice was a low rumble, deeper than the thunder from the night before, but gentle. It was a voice used to command, but he was softening it for her. "I'm not going to hurt you." You're the one who saved me. Selene could only nod, her voice still lost somewhere between her panic and the startling intensity of his gaze. He looked around the small cabin, his eyes taking in the humble surroundings, the patched roof, the simple furniture, the herbs drying from the rafters. His expression was unreadable. "My name is Sai," he said, offering her a small, cautious smile. It transformed his face, making him seem less like a fierce predator and more like a man. A very handsome, very shirtless man in her tiny cabin. "I was traveling. Got caught in the storm. Rogues attacked me, drove me over the ridge." The lie came easily, a story crafted from a lifetime of necessity. "I owe you my life." Finally, Selene found her voice, though it was little more than a whisper. "Selene. My name is Selene." She gestured weakly around the room. This is my place. Are you hungry?" "I don't have much, but..." Her Omega instincts to provide, to care, kicked in even through her bewilderment. Sai's smile widened and something warm flickered in his golden eyes. "I am starving actually." That broke the tension. Selene moved to her small pantry, her movements stiff and self-conscious. She pulled out a loaf of yesterday's bread, a wedge of hard cheese and a few dried apples, arranging them on a wooden plate. It was a pitiful offering for a man of his obvious size and strength. She brought it to him, her eyes downcast. "I'm sorry it's not more." He took the plate, his fingers brushing against hers. A jolt, like a spark from the fireplace, shot up her arm. She snatched her hand back, and from his sharp intake of breath, she knew he had felt it too. That strange, electric connection. He didn't comment, simply took a bite of the bread. "It's perfect," he said, and he sounded like he genuinely meant it. The day unfolded in a strange, new rhythm. Selene, accustomed to solitude, now shared her space with this enormous, quiet presence. He insisted on helping her, despite his injuries. He sat at her small table and helped her sort the roots she had gathered, his large, capable hands surprisingly deft. He asked her questions about her herbs, listening intently as she explained their uses, his focus entirely on her. No one had ever listened to Selene like that before. It made her feel seen. In the afternoon, a shadow fell across the open doorway. Beta Grunt stood there, his hulking form blocking the light. "Omega," he barked, not even bothering to come inside. "The Alpha's mate says the roots aren't clean enough. You'll do them again tomorrow. And we need more firewood chopped. Now." Before Selene could even open her mouth to respond, Sai spoke from where he sat, his voice deceptively calm. "She's busy." Grunt's head snapped around, finally noticing the large, unfamiliar man in the corner. His eyes narrowed. "And who are you?" "This is none of your concern. The Omega has her duties." Sai slowly, deliberately rose to his full height. Even injured, he towered over Beta Grunt. The air in the small cabin grew thick and heavy, charged with a dominance so potent it made the hairs on Selene's arms stand up. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. He simply looked at Grunt, his golden eyes glowing with a silent, absolute authority. "I said," Sai repeated, each word dropping like a stone, "she is busy." Beta Grunt, for the first time Selene could ever remember, took a step backward. His bravado crumbled under the weight of Sai's unspoken power. He mumbled something unintelligible and shuffled away, quickening his pace until he was practically running back toward the main pack grounds. Selene stared at Sai, her mouth agape. "You shouldn't have done that. He'll make it worse for me later." Sai turned to her, the terrifying alpha expression melting away, replaced by something much softer, much warmer. "No," he said, his voice certain. "He won't." He took a limping step toward her, closing the distance between them. He reached out, and this time she didn't flinch away. His thumb gently brushed over the raw scrape on her palm, the one she'd gotten freeing him from the tree. The touch sent another, warmer spark through her. "Someone should have been doing that for you all along," he murmured, his voice so low it was almost a vibration she felt rather than heard. He didn't let go of her hand. He just stood there looking down at her, his thumb making slow, gentle circles on her skin. The world outside the cabin, the pack, her duties, her loneliness, faded away until there was nothing but the two of them in the quiet, sunlit room. Selene felt her fear and uncertainty begin to melt under the warmth of his touch and the intensity of his gaze. She had saved a wounded creature, but the man looking at her now made her feel like she was the one who had been rescued. The strange and wonderful dream of the last 2 days settled into a fragile rhythm within the walls of Selene's cabin. Sai's presence had woven itself into the very fabric of her solitary life, transforming it into something she had never dared to imagine. His leg was healing with a speed that astonished her, a testament to his inherent strength, and he moved around her small space with a growing ease that made her heart do foolish, fluttering things. He continued to help with her chores, his company a quiet, solid comfort. In the evenings they sat by the fire, and he would tell her stories of the northern lands he claimed to be from, tales of vast, snow-covered forests and mountains that pierced the clouds. Selene, in turn, would share the secret language of her plants, showing him which leaf could ease a headache and which berry could soothe a burn. She found herself talking more than she ever had in her entire life, her words spilling out to him as if they had been dammed up for years and he was the only safe shore. It was during one of these quiet moments, with the setting sun painting the cabin in hues of orange and gold, that the real world decided to crash back in. Selene was laughing at a funny story Cy had concocted about a mischievous squirrel in his fictional northern pack when the sound of a dozen rapid, purposeful footsteps echoed outside. Before either of them could react, the door to her cabin was thrown open with such force it rattled on its hinges. A man stood there, framed in the doorway. He was tall and powerfully built, with a fierce, handsome face and eyes that scanned the room with a soldier's precision. His gaze landed on Cy, and his stern expression dissolved into one of profound relief. He strode into the room, completely ignoring Selene as if she were part of the furniture, and dropped to one knee, bowing his head deeply. "My king," the man's voice was a mixture of urgency and reverence. "Thank the moon we found you. The entire royal guard has been scouring the territories for 2 days. The council is in an uproar. Are you harmed?" The word hung in the air between them, heavy and final. "King." Selene felt the blood drain from her face. The piece of bread she was holding slipped from her numb fingers and landed on the floor with a soft, pathetic thud. She looked from the kneeling warrior, his beta she realized with a sickening jolt, to Cy. No, not Cy. Cyrus. The Alpha King. The most powerful wolf in all the realms, a figure from stories told to pups, a distant, glittering legend. And he was in her broken-down cabin, wearing bandages made from her old dress. Cyrus's face tightened. The easy, relaxed man from a moment ago was gone, replaced by a mantle of authority that seemed to make him physically larger. He placed a hand on the beta's shoulder. "Stand, Jax. My injuries are being seen to." His eyes, those piercing gold eyes, flickered to Selene, and in them she saw a flash of something that looked like regret. Or pity. The sight of it was like a knife to her heart. Jax rose to his feet, finally noticing her. His eyes swept over her simple, worn dress, her calloused hands, the humble surroundings, and his lip curled in a barely concealed sneer. It was the same look Beta Grunt always gave her. The look that said Omega. Unimportant. Nothing. "You," Jax said, his tone dismissive. "The king thanks you for your assistance. You will be compensated." He turned back to Cyrus. "My king, we must leave at once. Your betrothed is most anxious." The word betrothed was a second, colder knife twisting deep inside her. Of course. A king would be promised to a princess, to a Luna of a great pack. Not to someone like her. She had been a fool. A stupid, lonely fool who had believed a handsome stranger's kind words. She took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were suddenly cold. "You lied to me," she whispered, the words barely audible. She wasn't looking at Jax, she was looking only at Cyrus, her voice trembling with a hurt so profound it stole her breath. "You said you were a traveler. You said your name was Cy." Cyrus took a step toward her, his own mask of kingship cracking to reveal the man beneath, a man who was desperately trying to find the right words. "Selene, please. Let me explain. I was not lying about who I am, only about my title. I was disguised for a reason. I needed to escape the politics, the expectations. I needed to find someone who would see me, not a crown." Just then more figures appeared at the door. Beta Grunt and 2 other pack enforcers, drawn by the commotion. They gaped at the scene before them. The fearsome royal Beta, the legendary Alpha King standing in the Omega's hovel, and Selene herself looking small and shattered. Grunt's eyes widened in terror as he understood who stood before him. He fell to his knees, yanking his companions down with him. "Alpha King, forgive us. We had no idea you were here. Had we known, we would have provided proper accommodations, not this. He gestured vaguely at Selene in her cabin, his meaning abundantly clear. Cyrus's head snapped toward Grunt, and the full, terrifying force of his power filled the room. It was a physical pressure, a dominance so absolute it made the air hum. The anger he had kept carefully leashed now broke free, and it was not for show. It was real, and it was entirely for her. "You will stand," Cyrus commanded, his voice like frozen steel. The three wolves scrambled to their feet, trembling. He took another step, placing himself squarely between them and Selene. "This female," he said, each word dripping with icy fury, "showed more courage and kindness in one night than your entire pack has shown her in a lifetime. She saved your king. She is under my protection. From this moment forward, any disrespect shown to her, any harm, any unkind word, will be considered a direct insult to the crown. And you will answer to me." The color drained from Grunt's face. He looked like he might be sick. "Why is my king?" "Of course my king." Cyrus turned his back on them, dismissing them from his world. His entire focus returned to Selene. Jax and the cowed pack members stood frozen, witnesses to a scene none of them could comprehend. Cyrus's voice softened, but the intensity in his eyes burned brighter than ever. "The betrothal Jax spoke of is a political arrangement made by my council. It means nothing. I ended it the moment I decided to come on this journey." He took her cold hands in his warm ones, ignoring everyone else in the room. "The only thing that is real to me is the connection I found here, with you. I'm sorry I lied. I was trying to find the truth. And I found it in you." The journey to the Silver Citadel, the heart of Cyrus's kingdom, was a voyage into a world Selene had only ever heard about in whispered tales. They did not walk or run. They traveled in a sleek black carriage that seemed to glide over the forest paths, flanked by a solemn, respectful honor guard led by the fierce but now deferential Beta Jax. Selene spent most of the journey staring out the window, watching the familiar dense woods of her old territory give way to rolling hills and then to vast, open meadows under a wide, generous sky. Cyrus sat beside her, his presence a steady, calming force. He didn't push her to talk, allowing her the silence she needed to process the utter earthquake that had reshaped her life. He simply held her hand, his thumb tracing slow, reassuring circles on her skin, a silent promise that she was not alone. When the citadel came into view, Selene's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a castle of cold, dark stone as she had imagined. It was a magnificent structure built from pale silver-veined marble that gleamed in the sunlight, with towers that spiraled gracefully towards the clouds. It looked less like a fortress and more like a place carved from moonlight and dreams. As they passed through the towering gates and into the main courtyard, hundreds of faces turned to look. Members of the royal pack, dressed in fine silks and polished leather, stopped their activities to bow deeply as their king passed. But their eyes, sharp and curious, lingered on the slender, wide-eyed girl at his side. Selene felt their gazes like physical touches, assessing her simple dress, her nervous posture. She heard the whispers, a faint, buzzing hum of questions and doubt. Who is she? An Omega? From where? The first few days were a blur of overwhelming newness. Servants attended to her, which felt deeply strange. A kind, older woman named Anya was assigned as her handmaiden and became her first timid friend within the citadel's walls. Cyrus was often pulled away by his duties, council meetings, disputes to settle, the endless work of a king, but he always returned to her side, always sought her out. He gave her a spacious suite of rooms with a balcony that overlooked a stunning private garden. "This is yours," he had said softly. "A place where you can always feel the earth and grow your plants. A place to breathe." But the court was not easily won over. During a formal dinner in the Grand Hall, a tall, elegant she-wolf with cold eyes, a member of a powerful allied pack, openly scrutinized Selene. "And what," the woman drawled, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "are the special talents of your birth pack, my dear? I assume they must be truly remarkable to have caught our king's eye." The unspoken words hung in the air. What can a mere Omega possibly offer a king? Selene felt her cheeks burn. Old instincts screamed at her to lower her eyes, to mumble an apology, to shrink away. She felt Cyrus tense beside her, ready to leap to her defense. But then she thought of her garden back home, of the quiet strength it took to make something beautiful grow in poor soil. She thought of the storm and the wounded king she had not hesitated to save. She slowly lifted her chin, meeting the woman's gaze directly. "My lady," she said, her voice clear and steady, surprising even herself. "In my pack we learned the value of kindness over cruelty, and of compassion over status. We learned that true strength isn't just in how high you can rise, but in how you lift others up. Those are the talents I was taught." A profound silence fell over the table. The woman looked away, chastened. Cyrus's hand found hers under the table, and she could feel the proud smile in his touch without even having to look at him. That small victory was a turning point. Slowly, steadily, Selene's genuine nature began to charm the citadel. She was seen in the healing wards, offering comfort to the sick and helping to organize the medicinal herbs with an expertise that impressed the royal healers. She walked among the common folk in the citadel town, listening to their stories with a sincerity that could not be faked. The whispers didn't stop, but their tone began to change, shifting from doubt to curiosity, and then to a dawning respect. One evening, Cyrus led her up to the highest balcony of the tallest tower, a place that looked out over the entire moon-drenched kingdom. The world was silent and beautiful below them. He turned to her, taking both of her hands in his. His golden eyes were serious, filled with a love so deep it made her heart ache. "Selene," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I spent my life looking for a queen. I thought I needed someone from a powerful bloodline, a political partner. But the moon brought me a storm, and in that storm I found you. You are my shelter. You are my strength. You see the man, not just the king." He sank down onto one knee, and from his pocket he drew a ring. It held a gemstone the color of a twilight sky, deep blue and dotted with tiny specks that glittered like stars. "You do not have to say yes. Your title, this kingdom, none of it matters. Only you matter. Selene, my love, my savior, will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Will you be my queen?" Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down Selene's face. There was no hesitation, no doubt. The lonely Omega girl was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her home, her worth, and her love, all in the heart of a king. "Yes," she breathed, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Cyrus. 1,000 times yes." The wedding was a spectacle of light and love. The great hall was filled with every fragrant flower and green plant that could be found, turning the marble palace into a living garden, a tribute to their first meeting. Selene wore a gown of silver that shimmered like starlight on water. But as she walked down the aisle, she didn't see the nobles or the grandeur. She saw only Cyrus, waiting for her at the end, his eyes glowing with a love that promised a lifetime of devotion. Under the light of the full moon, they spoke their vows, binding their souls together forever. When Cyrus placed the crown upon her head, a delicate, graceful circlet of silver woven like vines, a new power settled into her spirit. It was not the power of command but the power of belonging. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, but the new king and queen stole away to their balcony, to the quiet world under the stars. Cyrus stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her head as they looked out at their sleeping kingdom. Selene leaned back into his embrace, into the solid, warm strength of him. She was no longer the girl in the crumbling cabin. She was Selene the queen. She had started with a kind heart and a brave choice in a storm, and it had led her here, to her destiny, to her king, to her happily ever after. And so their story finds its happy ending under the watchful moon. But the world of the Pax is vast, filled with countless other tales waiting to be told. Stories of love found in unexpected places, of courage in the face of danger, of destiny that whispers on the wind. If you cherish the journey of Selene and Cyrus, if you yearn to lose yourself in another world of fierce love and thrilling adventure, then make sure to follow along. Subscribe to stay connected, because every new story is a new beginning, and the next great adventure is always just a page turn away.